I'm Chris Tate. I'm a life coach. I am a former dean of a middle school at Porter Gaud here in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm also the executive director of a nonprofit that I founded about 10 years ago called Bicycles for Humanity Charleston. Leadership is a big topic. It's very broad. There are a lot of qualities that I think come into play to be a good leader, a great leader. I think leadership qualities start with an individual. I think they start with leadership of self. So, what I mean by that is, what are the qualities that make a good leader? And I think you can ask anyone this question that has to lead their own life. How do you lead your life? How do you lead it well? What are the qualities that give you success in your life? And I think those things run across the board in leadership. So, that would be things like good communication, being positive, being empathetic, having fun, being a good listener, being honest. I think those are all things that I aspire to be as a person. As my role as dean in the past 24 years, I worked with students on developing those qualities. And I think they carry through to leaders that lead people, lead organizations, and lead causes. So that being said, I feel like I've done some work with an organization called the Center for Creative Leadership, and they have something called their Fundamental Four. The idea of the Fundamental Four is that they believe there are four qualities that are essential to leadership, and they are self-awareness. That means you have an awareness of your own behavior and the effect on the organization. Communication, being able to communicate the goals of the organization while also building trust with the people that you lead. A term called knowledge flexibility, which is really interesting. And what this says is that you have the ability to know when to shift the goal or the focus of the organization based on new information. And the fourth one is influence. And I think this is the biggest one. So influence is the understanding that you have the ability to motivate, persuade, promote, and delegate to the people that you lead. And I think those are four qualities that are really important, but they're very broad. So, I'd love to dig in with self-awareness in particular, because I think, again, back to what I said, everything starts with the individual. And for me, I believe great leaders create leaders. And I think the only way you can do that is to have a sense of another quality that I love in leadership, which is authenticity. So you have to have a self-awareness enough to know who you are, what you're good at, what your God-given abilities are, your strengths, and be able to bring them to bear to achieve goals of an organization, but also lead other people. So there's a lot to unwrap in that. And I think some of that is honesty and being able to communicate really well, that people feel like you're being honest and authentic and open with them. So that you can build relational trust and you can motivate them to do work that needs to be done to achieve goals. And I also think it has to do with getting to know someone else and being open to ideas from other people and understanding what motivates them. So back to one of those four fundamental fours, influence. As a leader, you have the ability to motivate and persuade people. Well, people are motivated by a lot of different things. So I think if you don't know what your team is motivated by, what each individual is motivated by, their why they're there, why they're working, what gives them satisfaction in their job, their role, their life, then you've missed a huge opportunity to be successful as a leader. That creates this kind of interpersonal skills that are really necessary to be a good leader. And then communication, I think, is a big one, because there's lots of ways to communicate. You can communicate verbally in front of someone. Some people say body language is a great way to communicate. Tone, volume. You have to communicate with the written word. Sometimes you communicate one-to-one. Sometimes you're communicating to a customer, an audience, or your team. And all of those styles of communication are required and they're important. And you can't necessarily have the same style in each situation. So again, self-awareness and your ability to understand your influence should lead to a communication style that's appropriate for whoever you're dealing with. That's why they're really related. And of course, the last one of this knowledge flexibility, you could say, is adaptability, right? So when things go sideways, you have to be able to shift. And what we know about life is change is inevitable. It's inevitable in every organization, with every human being. I mean, COVID proved that, if not everything else, every day. And so I think a good leader has the ability to recognize that and to take in data and be able to turn the ship when it's necessary, but also influence other people to do the same. So for example, with me, I think I can use two things that are combined, really, self-awareness and communication. So my communication style is typically direct and transparent, and that doesn't always work. And so for me, I'm a passionate person, another quality of a good leader, I believe. And so sometimes my passion can override my communication style, and that doesn't always come across the way I want it to. So for me, I've been, as a dean, I've been in front of families and parents a lot to talk about middle school and student life in particular, and the programs that I was responsible for, which was wellness programs with leadership as a focus and experiential learning, but also discipline. And if you're a parent of a middle schooler, especially a young one, there's a fear of middle school for your children. You want to make sure that you're sending your child somewhere that you can trust the people who are caring for your children and that you understand why they do what they do. So for me, being in front of parents each year on kind of new parent night, I had to make sure that, one, I built trust with them by letting them understand how we get to know their children and how each child is valued and the process and programs in which we did that to build that trust before I could even start to talk about the programs and the things we felt were the best ways to do that. And I had to use my communication skills to kind of persuade them that I was on their team and that together as parent and school, we were on the team of their child. And so everything we did at school was in the best interest of that child. And so when we talked about the wellness programs or experiential learning or even the discipline programs, when rules were broken and hard conversations had to be made, the parents can understand why we were doing what we were doing. So for me, that was about how I presented it calmly and succinctly and in a way that I felt like I had a responsibility to share with them information that they needed and influence their view of us as a school that they've dropped their children off to every day. So I think over the years, I got really good at that. And what it did was it eased the anxiety that parents had, which in turn eased the anxiety that children had in coming to the middle school, which can be, can be difficult. So it was a hugely impactful way for me to use a quality that I still have to work on, communication, in a way that helps me achieve the goal of the school. I'd like to talk about influence from the standpoint of oftentimes when you're a leader, you have kind of multiple entities and levels of leadership maybe above and below you that you have a responsibility to, right? The best example for me is I was the dean of a middle school. There was a head of a middle school. There were grade level deans in the middle school. I was running a wellness program that utilized the counselor, and together we had to get a lot done, and also the faculty. But then we also had to make sure that the people above our division, the academic dean, the dean of wellness, the headmaster, the associate headmasters, also knew what we were doing and why we were doing it. And at the time, Life 101, which is the name of the wellness program, didn't exist. So we were creating something that didn't exist before. And it was around wellness and the well-being of kids. So for me, one of the qualities I think that I have that I've used in my life at every turn, every day, is intuition. I feel like I'm a deeply intuitive person, and that guides a lot of my decisions in my life. And of course, I do a lot of self-reflection and self-improvement. So I know my personality test, I'm an intuitive. I'm into human design. So I'm a generator, and the generator basically makes decisions with their gut, their intuition. So it was easy for me to explain why I thought it was going to work, but I knew I had to influence the people above me and communicate and kind of persuade them that this was going to be a good idea because it didn't exist. I had 278 kids and families that were on the receiving end of this. So that took a lot of time, and it took, communication skills certainly. But I think that in the role that I was in and having the responsibility that I did and knowing what my kind of North Star was, which was what's in the best interest of kids, as long as I kind of had that as the goal and the mission. It's very much like the ideal life and having this dream goal, or what they would call reverse engineering, knowing what the end should be and then working backwards. I could sell that, so to speak, from the standpoint of I can communicate why it was important and what the end result would be in a way that, I knew in my heart would work. So I feel like it was influence that allowed me to do that. There are many ways to influence, but I think that was an important quality that I had to kind of leverage to achieve a goal that, kind of visionary in a sense, because it hadn't existed before, which goes to leadership styles and, my style as a leader. So how I prioritize my own growth and also be aware and cognizant of people under my leadership. Again, it goes back to leadership of self. I mean, for me, my own growth is important to me personally. And I know that I can't show up anywhere in life as a leader, as a partner, as a father, as a friend, unless I'm getting better as a person. For me, it's kind of the self inventory, self care, self-improvement that I've really always been interested in. So an easy way to answer that from a leadership standpoint also is not just personal growth that has maybe nothing to do with my role as leader, but that idea of self-awareness and bringing myself, my authentic self, to a leadership role. But in that leadership role, I had professional development goals. I wanted to get better at lots of things. In education, there is progressive education. There are a lot of great ideas. There's project-based learning. There's all kinds of things that schools do and do well, especially around wellness and experiential learning, which, are my passion. So I had a professional development plan myself that I built with my head, and he helped me with that. And then with people that I work with, professional development plans are a way to kind of get at that. And what that involves is kind of evaluating people in their current role and then have them actually self-analyze, self-reflect, and self-evaluate on what do they think they do really well and where are areas they think they need to grow on. This is tough because some people are really self-aware and know, and some people don't. So I think sitting with people to understand what lights them up, why they're there, what they're passionate about, and then guide their professional development and their growth in that direction, because that'll give them satisfaction, really leverages the most valuable resource you have, which is people. But the other piece is there's also job roles that they have to get good at. So sometimes evaluating their role as a teacher or dean or some other areas, there are things they have to do that are required for the job itself. And if you can agree upon that with people that you work with or that work for you, then you have a plan in place to develop those people, and they can grow as you grow, but you can also go back and check in to make sure that they're on that path. The beauty of that, I think, is not only are you helping facilitate and lift people up in the ways that they want to grow, but it, I think, connects you to those people in a team environment, and you can accomplish a lot more. The other thing is you have data to make tough conversations. If there's a development plan and it's not going well, or they're not growing in that direction, and that's a direction they said they wanted to grow in and you agree upon, then it's a conversation you can have about, why aren't these things happening? Is everything okay? Are you finding joy in this job? This might not be the right thing. I mean, even to that point. And so I think personal growth and professional growth they're tied hand in hand for a leader. They're also tied to your ability to lead people who also have to grow and hit the goals of an organization when you're the leader of that organization or that team. Motivation. How do you keep your team motivated? This is good. Now, I've spent 23 years as a dean of a middle school. So my team is oftentimes young kids, but I also spent 18 years as a football coach, coaching JV football. Different people are motivated by different things. So for example, as adults on a team, some people are motivated by you giving them a task and delegating and letting them have autonomy to go do that thing. Tell them what to do and they're going to go do it. Those are the troops on the ground. Some people need more support in that. They want to do it with you. They want to bounce ideas back off of you. So you have to be available to that. And that keeps them going. Some people want affirmation that they're doing a good job. They want a pat on the back. They want a shout out in a meeting. They want an email that says you're doing great. Some people are motivated by money. A raise, a bonus. Some people are motivated by time. Some people would argue that's the most valuable resource there is your time. You have to be aware of people's time when you ask them for their time or extra time. So the only way you can motivate people is to understand what motivates each one of those people, because we're all so different these days, especially with the younger generation coming in. There's a lot of different ideas about the work that they're engaged in and why they're there and how long they might be there for. Leadership is a business of building people, is what I think. And as a football coach, I knew how to motivate different people on the team. Some of them needed the tough love, to motivate them and challenge them a little bit. And then some of them needed the pat on the back and the hug and, you're doing great. So I think it comes back to the interpersonal skills and the people skills and really knowing who your team is and what motivates each one of them. So I've had a lot of mentors in my life. I've had a lot of coaches in my life. I've played a lot of organized athletics, including my father, who was my football and baseball coach. And I got a lot of extra coaching with my father. So, hero, mentor, coach in many ways, not perfect in many ways. And I think it's interesting that I followed in his footsteps in some ways, but he's not me, I'm not him. So I have my own unique brand of what I believe to be, leadership style and mentoring and coaching. That being said, there are two that come to mind, two mentors or leaders that I worked for who I appreciate, won't forget, and they both brought different qualities that we've talked about. The first one was a while ago in my late 20s and early 30s. I worked for IBM, and I worked for IBM Global Services, which at the time was the largest IT services company in the world. And my title was e-business solutions specialist. So I was in sales, selling consulting services right when the internet was just kind of blowing up. And it was a crazy, fast-paced environment. I was part of a team. I was living in Atlanta, and Christine Shropshire, who was our leader, our sales manager, was this kind of glowing, radiant, passionate person who just loved people. And we had this team with an enormous quota under the gun every day, having to be on the phone, making calls, selling, marketing. And the way she approached her leadership style was to become really connected to each one of us as a team and then connect us together as a team. So she would come in, with food or coffee. She would ask how your day was, how your weekend was. We didn't even talk about work. It was more her ability to connect with each one of us that created this culture where you felt like a family and you felt like you had to show up for one another. And it was a pleasure to work for her. And the work was hard, the work was tough, but we always hit our quota and we always had fun and we kind of loved being around each other. And it was really, I would say, an anomaly of what a sales team typically could look like. And the way she approached her leadership style, again, it was self-awareness and it was her ability to know her influence on us and how to motivate each of us, again, back to motivation, by connecting to each one of us and really caring. Like she was genuinely concerned with my well-being and how I was doing. So I'll never forget that experience. And then I have another story about a more recent leader, Randy Clark, who was the head of the middle school. And he is kind of legacy at Porter-Gaud. He was there for 30 plus years. He was a basketball coach that won 3 state championships. He was the middle school head and principal. He taught history. He played basketball at the College of Charleston. A lot of people know Randy Clark in that name. So I worked for Randy when I first came into education 23 years ago. The thing that was so just, I guess, refreshing about Randy's approach was he had faith and confidence in kind of people's ability to be successful in whatever way that meant. So personally, what that meant was as the dean, and there had never been a dean before. So there wasn't a role that I applied for as a leadership role. I was doing something else. And the headmaster at the time, Chris Proctor, asked me to be the middle school dean because Randy Clark could use some help with kind of the student life piece and discipline. That's how I kind of moved into that role. And when I started to have ideas of what we could do better and what I thought would work for kids and what would serve them the best, help the teachers, whenever I had all these big ideas, because I'm kind of a big ideas guy, never shut them down. He never said that's a terrible idea. He would ask questions and then he would tell me, well, go work on that and let's see what happens. And I was shocked that I got the answer I really wanted. And what that really turned into was motivating me to go do what I thought, again, intuitively was going to be good for kids. And as the weeks and months went on, I would report back to him and he would tell me, this is great. This is a great idea. Keep doing that. This, not so much. So he had this uncanny knack of really trying to pull the best out of me by just kind of giving me autonomy and trusting that I could get the job done. He gave me confidence without really doing a whole lot other than just saying, you keep doing that. That's a good idea. He really knew how to handle people and he had those skills without really doing a whole lot. So for him, it was the way he handled his influence and the way he communicated to me. And also this kind of knowledge flexibility to be able to say, hey, that's a good idea, but let's move this way. And maybe we go down that path a little bit more. So those are the two that come to mind when you ask mentors or leaders that I've had in my life that have kind of shaped my own leadership style. So if I talk about my own leadership journey, it's really some of the leadership roles I've had in my life are because I sought them out. I think coaching kids is one of those type of roles. Applying for a job, that maybe had a leadership role into that. That's part of it. So some of it was contrived, if you will. It was purposeful and what I wanted to do, knowing who I am, knowing what my purpose in life is, which is really using my strengths to kind of make the world a better place, so to speak. And then some of them just came about because of the work that I was doing. And someone said, oh, that guy over there, he's really doing all this work. This is great. He should take this role on. And so you have to be careful with that, right? So I've taken on some leadership roles where I was more ego and I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to get paid more and I'm going to have this title and this is about me. Those don't work as well. I think that happens oftentimes. It's this kind of reluctant leader thing or this imposter syndrome idea, right? Where you become a leader, but you're not really sure you are a leader, but you have these skills that people see as leadership skills. And then you wind up doing something that might not resonate with who you are as a person. And sometimes those things don't work. So here's an example. When Randy Clark died, passed away unexpectedly, who was my boss, my friend, my mentor, and he was the leader of our middle school, there was a hole to be filled that could never be filled. And at the time, I thought, as the dean of kind of students and student life, that I should fill that role because the next step in my leadership journey, and so I applied for that role. And thank God I didn't get that role because what I learned and what I've learned about myself on this journey is whatever role you take as a leader, it has to resonate with this sense of who you are as a person and this idea of purpose. And I think if you know what you're good at and you know what your strengths are and you can put that into play, then you get satisfaction, not only out of life, but certainly out of your job, which I hope those things, sometimes it's best to have those lines blurred. You can't map out a journey like this. But if I had to give advice to anyone starting on this journey, there's a couple things that I would say. One is do the work inside first. So, leadership is an inside job, just like life. You're only as good as you're able to, I think, access who you are at the core. And sometimes those things are set. Sometimes you can work on those things. That's number one. If you do that and if you come from that place, then the experiences you have will be more enjoyable. The other is deep listening, right? Seek to understand other people and where they're coming from, because if you're leading people and you don't know who they are, you're not concerned with what motivates them, or you're not generally invested in their success, you will fail as a leader. You won't be relatable. You won't be able to lead people. You won't be motivational. You won't be inspirational. You won't be able to persuade or have influence. So be vested in other people as well. Be positive. It's easy to be negative, the water cooler syndrome. People love to gossip. They love to talk about all the bad things that are going on. And I think the way to be positive is to be grateful for the things you have in your life. If you can be grateful, you can be positive. And I think that relates and it has a big impact on the people around you. It's infectious. And then I have two more things. One is, and this is the best advice that my father gave me. He was a man of few words, but lots of action. And he would say, never take yourself or life too seriously, which to me gets at this idea that life should be joyous and you should have fun. And I think if you're a leader, you have to have fun in your role and you have to have fun with the people who are on your team or who you interact with every day. If you can be positive and you can have fun and you can be interested in them and you can know yourself, you can lead anybody. And I think that's what allows good leaders and good teams to achieve goals and to kind of reach heights and get the best out of each other. And sometimes it's even surprising to people what they're capable of doing if you can kind of access those things. To close, I'd love to talk about two quotes that I love. Good leaders lead people from above, and great leaders lead people from within. So I think this goes back to the idea of you have to connect to people. Leadership is about people. At the end of the day, it's the people that do the work. It's not the leader, which kind of leads me to this other quote about what happens with great leaders is when the work is done, the people say we did it ourselves. Right. So they did it without the leader. So I think that could sum up what I would say is great leadership philosophy and something that I aspire to be and still and always will aspire to that, which is really hard because that has to do with ego and personal recognition and a lot of things that people think leaders should get. I'm Chris Tate. I'm a coach with The Ideal Life. I love the philosophy around the ideal life, and here's why. For me, I'm kind of a big ideas dreamer type of person. So everything in my life is this grand idea that I have off in the future that I aspire to be and that I'm pursuing. But you can't really reach a dream goal or you can't reach those goals without backing it down to smaller bits and pieces until you really get to what do you do every day to kind of achieve those things. You can't achieve anything without intention. And intention means you have to take your attention and you have to apply it to the thing you intend to do. And nothing has ever been accomplished without attention. For me, I think what the ideal life has done is it's giving me some tools to allow me to work towards those goals every day in a very simple way that makes me feel good about the direction that I'm going. So there's this notion of schedule your priorities. And what I love about that is that's basically saying, what is the priority in my life that I think is the most important thing? And that's what I'm going to schedule into my day. So it gave me a kind of a path that I didn't have before. Because sometimes I'd see that goal off in the future and I'd look back and think, I'm not nowhere closer to that than I've been, than I was last month. But with the ideal life, I think it's given me some really simple tools to one, allow me to make progress, but also feel good about what I was doing along the way. And that's kind of the dose chemical pieces of that.